Okay, good morning. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name's Nick Farmer. I'm a tax partner here at Menzies and I focus on our corporate clients. And today we're talking about a mix of a well-governed finance function. What goes into it? What are the key responsibilities of the function? How are these responsibilities expanding? How is the function adding value to the business? So quite a lot of issues there. We look at it through three key lenses. We'll be looking at sort of risk management, resource management, and then also that value orientation. What is that value proposition of the function to the rest of the business? Delighted to be joined by our panelists today. I'm joined by Kelly Duffett, Financial Controller of Anytime Fitness, 24/7 high-spec gyms business. We have 175 plus gyms in the UK and over 4,000 globally. So a very big international business. Looking forward to exploring these topics with you. Got Grace Hall, Group Finance Director of RW Armstrong Group, a fourth generation family business specializing in renovation, extension and refurbishment of period and country homes. And then finally and not least, Charlotte Langdon, Director at Menzies in our Farnborough office, audit and financial reporting expert. You're a lead in our technical team for a while and also have a particular specialism in manufacturing companies. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Perhaps I can just ask you to start with just to sort of introduce yourself, a bit more about the business, your role, how your finance function sort of looks, just to give people an idea of the expertise that we sort of are talking through today. So Grace, perhaps over to you.
Thank you. So you've already given me a very good introduction, but I am the FD of a construction company turning over circa 100 million based near Basingstoke. Obviously working on high-end properties for high net worth individuals. We build sort of one-off bespoke houses, renovations and conservation. The finance team consists of 7, including myself. That includes payroll, subcontractor, ledgers and purchase ledger and general accounting. I've been with the business 34 years and I've seen it grow fairly dramatically over that time.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Kelly?
I'm Kelly. So I work for Anytime UK. So we're actually a franchise business, so slightly different to your normal style of business. Anytime Fitness US is owned by a master franchisor. We franchise off of them and then we franchise to our clubs. So we're sort of the middle of a franchising relationship, which sort of when you talk about stakeholders and things like that makes our role quite interesting.
Okay.
We've got 180, so the 175 plus was correct clubs at the moment operating. I've been with the company just over a year and a half. So it was my first move to industry from a audit background. And sort of my introduction to the company was like a real automation of the financial product, basically. So lots of changes of systems, sort of putting in some automation in places and sort of changing the direction of the finance function. Our finance function is 60. So as a company in the UK, we're actually classed as a small company because of the franchise nature. So our head office employs about 40 people, of which 6 sit in my team.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And Charlotte?
You've given me a good introduction already, Nick. I look after, as Nick already said, a variety of clients. I sit in our audit team, and pretty much all of my clients have an FD. So I look after our medium and large businesses and work with FDs across multiple sectors and see different FDs doing different things and different companies using their finance function in different ways.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's start sort of big picture anyway. So lots happening. We've had a budget yesterday. We may see a change of government over the next year. There's quite a lot of economic uncertainty. There's supply chain pressures. So lots happening out there for businesses to keep hold of. Grace, how have you seen the role of the finance function change over time? You say you've been there for 34 years. So, how have you seen that change?
Yeah, so obviously there have been a lot of change within the business, not necessarily in the finance function over that period, but obviously I've seen the business change and grow quite dramatically in the 34 years. However, the finance function has changed over time. I see it being more collaborative within the business. It's no longer a finance as a standalone function, but one that needs to strategize with the business and react accordingly. Much more proactive and much less reactive. For example, planned growth, which we've had several phases of throughout the years I've been here. Can the business afford this growth? You know, can we accommodate a cash reserve? Is the cash reserve suitable for what the business requires? So that's a big piece that we need to react to. And compliance is now much more demanding than it used to be. Many new things have come in online, particularly in the construction industry. We've seen many changes, such as reverse charge VAT and other requirements around CIS, etc. And obviously the changes in the recent autumn statement will be coming our way very soon. So yeah.
So I think that's right. Keeping up with all that pace of regulatory changes, you know, a constant challenge for businesses. And Kelly, you mentioned sort of earlier about sort of stakeholders. You know, how do you balance your time between the sort of the competing demands of those different stakeholders?
I think Grace just sort of touched on it as well, how the finance function is less seen as a individual support function now to companies. It's sort of involved in everything in the business. And what that means is you do now end up with a huge range of stakeholders in a finance position. I think the first thing, my priority is sort of sitting back and not reacting to the stakeholder that's directly in your face. I think that's one of the best things to do. Quite often, as a finance function, we are reactive to boards and executive teams because they are the people we see day to day, but actually taking a step back and thinking about our external stakeholders, our customers, is kind of where we and how I-centric my focus is what we're doing, focused towards our end goal rather than a reactive situation, and sort of taking that reactivity out of stakeholder demands and taking a step back and making sure that you prioritize in a way that is not entirely reactive to what's in front of you is how I sort of deal with my time, and making sure that, and that changes over time. That's not the same day to day, that changes every day. So just making sure you assess what the key stakeholders are at that point and where your priorities are, not just where they are.
Yeah, and I guess you're sort of mentioning their different stakeholders. You know, you've got to constantly be thinking, who are those stakeholders, whether they be the employees, the customers, the shareholders, the board. Actually, you know, there's a lot of different stakeholders to kind of keep in your mind when you're making decisions. Yeah,
definitely. It's, as I said earlier, as we're a kind of franchise, it's quite nice that we end up, most of our stakeholders have the same end goal. So we all sort of live and breathe the same company mission statement type thing. So it's really nice that our customers are also brought into our mission. It makes it a nice focus for us to make sure that everything we do reaches that end goal. But that where that's more challenging for us is things like the employees, the suppliers, where they fit into that relationship. And just making sure that we sort of serve everyone's needs and don't just focus on what's directly in front of us is really key for us. And we're really trying to move from more of a reactive approach to running our business generally than reactive.
And
those expectations is a key part of that.
That makes sense, and we will now just talk a little bit around that proactivity, because one of the areas is risk management. That's going to be a big area for any finance team, so being proactive around the risks that are hitting that business. You know, lots of different risks coming there. So some things that you may be able to prevent. So we're talking about regulatory sort of changes, or maybe FX exposures, those sort of things. Then you've got strategic risks around the business. I think Kelly mentioned funding earlier, and liquidity. Then you've got, you know, those external risks that, you know, are very difficult to manage, political, economic things that are sort of hitting the business. So a lot of risks for the finance department to actually sort of need to manage. Grace, across that, where are you sort of seeing your priorities, and how do you sort of decide, you know, how to approach or address them?
Yes, of course, I think our main priority risk is cash and cash management, and making sure that our cash is managed appropriately. You know, cash is king, as we all know, and without cash, a business doesn't exist, and that's got to be a priority in any in any business. The lack of cash can be obviously born by many different things, you know, a bad payer, or, you know, bad planning, making bad decisions on funding, etc. So I believe that the accurate reporting of the business and the accurate reporting of planning the business in regards to pipeline and commercial management is key, to make sure that the business can be planned accurately, and to review this constantly, not just to make the plan, but to revisit it continually. Model the plan and see the effects of that cash, review and test the model, stress test the model, you know, come up with lots of different scenarios that you think might happen, to stress test it and highlight the areas of concern, and then put in place other mitigating procedures. So such things, we use escrow for larger payments. If you've got a client who is, you know, on one of our larger projects that might have anything, I mean, we've just had our biggest valuation ever, which was 3.4 million in 1 month. You know, that doesn't come in, we're not a very happy business. So, you know, it's making sure that you've got mitigations in place. So whether that's escrow agreement, improved payment terms, building relationships with your clients as well is really important, and a team that all understand that same, you know, that same goal.
Yeah, and Charlotte, probably a good time to sort of bring you in here now, because you're working with businesses that are probably having the same sort of focuses that you know, other businesses have around this finance function. You know, where are you sort of seeing clients in terms of their risk management, perhaps sort of things that you're regularly seeing, quick wins? You know, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think some of it's been touched on a little bit already, but the finance function is no longer just a finance function in its own right and just doing its own thing. It's very much integrated in the operational side of the business. And there's a playoff between financial risk and operational risk. And FDs now tend to get involved in a bit of everything. And a lot of the time they're just following in the CEO's ideas, and they're kind of, the CEO or the MD is deciding that they're going to do this, and then the FD is going, hang on, we haven't thought about this, we now need to manage the risk, and have I got the cash, have we got the strategy in place to follow that through, and can we fulfill the thing that you're kind of trying to commit yourself to? And we live in an age now where decisions can be made really quickly. You can buy something off Amazon on your phone in 2 seconds if you decide that you want it, and that kind of approach is coming into business too. So the FD kind of risk management piece is really around knowing what's going on in the business, and knowing if that decision that a CEO is taking is able to be fulfilled by the cash and by everything else that's going on in the business. And obviously we've also talked a little bit about the kind of compliance and regulatory risk that you have in a business as well, and keeping up with CIS or VAT changes, or what came out of the autumn statement yesterday. So I think a key area of risk management is about having the right advisors in place. And I guess that's where we come in, that the clients that we work with regularly, we're on the phone to, where they're saying, this has come up and I don't know how to deal with it, and getting the right experts in place to support your risk management as well is a really key thing to be looking at.
Yeah, and just linking that into sort of the controls around the business then, and making sure that those controls are working for the business and not constraining it. Kelly, what's your view on that balance?
I think Charlotte touched on it there slightly. It's making sure you're assessing your own risk. I think there's a slight thing in when people take on a finance function of really like focusing on that risk and really putting everything in place to try and mitigate risk. I think sometimes people can overgovern finance functions. You take a risk approach of a FTSE 100 company and put it into a small and medium enterprise, you're going to be hugely overgoverned. It's not going to work, and I think that does happen. I think it's really important that the key thing is assessing your own business risk, not just taking a general view of everything, but seeing how it approaches your business. So, for example, reviewing things like the autumn statement, or reviewing legislation changes, and without panicking, thinking, actually, how does this impact us is the key. What do we need to do? Do we need to do anything? Is this a huge risk to some companies, but actually to us it's not? And taking that approach rather than overgoverning and being reactive and sort of, you know, being that finance person that lays down the law. Take a different approach to it and try and use commerciality to fuel those decisions so that we don't end up restricting business. We talk here about the importance of us being able to react quickly to a risk or an opportunity, but not reacting too quickly without thinking about it. So that reaction shouldn't be a decision. We should make sure that there's some kind of control that when you react, stops you, takes you back, but then you can get through it.
Yeah, so always relate these things back to the business, reflect on them before making a decision. One of the things that's clearly changing around businesses is technology. Lots of different sort of technologies that finance functions are now using. Grace, how are you seeing that? How are you sort of leveraging technology to deal with that sort of control, that sort of informing of decision making?
Yes, so we've always used a very collaborative, well, not always, but in the last sort of 10 years, we've had a very collaborative construction specific software that engages many areas of the business. So it's not an accounts piece of software. It sort of forces different individuals in the business to feed into it. So it does all the cost management, it has QS sign off, it has general accounting. So it's collaborative. So the rest of the business is feeding into the software. It also has compliance monitoring and other aspects to it, which are obviously useful. So what we've done with that piece of software is we use that data and we've now been feeding it into our cash flow model. And that cash flow model obviously then can, give us answers to the questions we raise, as per the previous question, around stress testing different scenarios, coming up with, what if this happened, what if that happened, and making sure that's in place so that we can mitigate that risk of cash. So the whole thing is sort of collaborative and interactive.
Yeah, so it sounds like sort of the technology then is delivering the data that you need to know where the cash is in the business to actually make and inform the decisions around the business. So you're getting a lot of real-time information to sort of know how to react to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because it's collaborative that you've got different departments within the business feeding in to give you that picture. Otherwise you would be, half of the information be missing.
Yeah. And Kelly, you mentioned that you're sort of in a franchise business. How does that sort of affect the technology? What are you sort of using the technology for? Is that making any difference to you, that sort of ownership model?
Yes, to an extent. So the way sort of we utilize technology is data. We're undergoing a massive project at the moment to try and basically inform our decision making better through data. Historically, it's not something we've got enough of from the network, which makes a real difference in franchising. Operating with 100 different, essentially, business owners on a monthly basis is very difficult to collect and collate data. So we're currently undergoing a large piece of work on data collection and trying to make sure that we are using data to inform our decisions rather than making emotional reactions. Especially with franchising, where you have a lot of different business owners who each gym is sort of their life, they've built this from the bottom up. Using technology to collate that and make it data rather than an emotional reaction is really important to us. It's kind of where tech really comes into our business model and making sure that we are keeping up to date with the performance of our clubs. Tech is fundamental, especially utilizing data systems and things like that to store this data so that we can pull on it rather than having to collate 100 different people in each month is key for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting that good feed of data, informing decision making, understanding what's going on the ground. Charlotte, you work with a lot of businesses. I presume you're seeing that sort of approach across the board.
Yeah, and we see different businesses doing it in different ways, and really it does need to be business specific, because something that you might take from the way that Kelly's running her team wouldn't work in Grace's team, just because they do different things and the businesses run in different ways. It's so heavily connected, the use of technology, to the management of your resources and the people that you have available. But really the way we're seeing it used well is when technology can be used to take away some of that simple repeated tasks, the manual things, the bits where systems aren't talking to each other and it involves somebody having to manually do something, because not only does it save somebody time and the kind of boring part of potentially some of their job and releases them to be able to get involved in the operational side, but it also reduces the risk because you've got something talking, the systems are talking to each other rather than somebody having to get manually involved, and there's room for error there. So I really think that it's a key thing that I think more and more businesses are doing.
Yeah, this is interesting because you're sort of talking there around resources and people, and clearly talent in teams is a big issue. That retention of talent, giving them a pathway for the future, but technology is obviously imposing on what those roles are. Maybe Kelly, you can talk around a bit of the structure in your team, those roles and responsibilities, obviously with issues from technology making a difference to what they look like.
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned, we are currently in the middle of doing a big data project, which has actually changed our team structure significantly. I think historically, even to within the last few years, the finance function within our company has been very accounting, finance, management accounting based. We are now introducing over the next 24 months, 2 big data roles, so finance business partnering, data analytics into the finance team directly. It's essentially become clear to us that those kind of roles are key to finance, and finance is no longer that internal management accounting monthly reporting, but actually needs to be reactive day to day to our network, especially in the franchise world where we're sort of dealing with day-to-day data and gym access and memberships and things like that. Data analytics has become really important to us, so I think it has really changed our finance team structure. We've now sort of got our typical accountants, as you'd call them, one side, and then sort of using those abilities in a commercial mindset the other side. Has really split our team, and I think that's going to happen in a lot of companies over the next few years as big data and sort of AI and things like that become more useful. The skill sets you need are to be able to read that data and to be able to work with those programs, not necessarily compile the data and create the data. So I think over time the finance function roles and responsibilities are going to change quite dramatically in that sense.
Yeah, so I guess there's a training need there as well for staff to be able to deal with that kind of interpretation and understanding what the data is actually meaning. That seems to be what the key role is that you're asking people to perform.
Yeah, definitely. Even like myself, in terms of my training need, it's something that's become obvious to me in the last sort of 6 months, that my data analytics and things like that need to really take a step up in the finance role I'm in. And I think it's important that we sort of develop on those skills alongside traditional accounting skills as well.
Yeah, and Charlotte, Grace mentioned earlier about cash flow and technology and the management of that cash flow. What are you seeing as the key things that you're talking to clients around cash flow? It's obviously the key resource in a business. You've got to manage that cash carefully. What are you sort of seeing businesses doing around that area?
I think, as Grace said earlier, cash is king, and that's probably a theme we'll talk about all the way through today, that really it's about knowing what you've got and what you're committed to. And I think businesses I see do this really well, understand exactly what their cash needs actually are. So what are you looking at? What are you actually committed to? And what cash availability do you have? And that's why the reporting around it is so important, because it needs to be accurate. And if you can feed in as much of accurate data to a cash flow forecast as possible, the better you're going to be able to manage that. And especially at the moment where interest rates are higher than they have been for a long time, the impact of borrowing or spending is kind of maybe a different decision than it has been before, because actually an outlay and taking on borrowing has been more expensive, or keeping cash and putting it in a high interest account maybe becomes more attractive to investing. So that decision and knowing what resource you have available in terms of what borrowing you've got access to, or how much you can get on interest on your cash that you maybe could invest, is quite key. Borrowing just becoming more expensive. And I think also standing back and thinking, what's your kind of backup plan if something happens that is unexpected? There's a sudden cash need. If you've got preferential suppliers that maybe you're going to focus on paying them earlier. I mean, most businesses would do anything and not pay any suppliers if they were going to pay their staff. Your staff are going to be the thing you're going to pay first. The people are the most important, and then you'll think about who's next. So it's just having that backup plan in place so that if something, you don't want it to happen, but if something does go wrong and things happen and you suddenly got a big cash outlay that you weren't expecting, like what's your backup plan? What borrowing have you got access to quickly, and what's your contingency plan? There is another way of looking at it.
I did see in the budget yesterday there was a sort of announcement around payment terms to small businesses from large businesses, and if they're going to be tendering for government contracts, they need to be able to demonstrate that they're actually paying their suppliers on time. So obviously some change in this area taking place.
Be interesting to see how that plays out.
Oh,
monitored as well.
Yeah, no, very much so. And moving on from looking at the resources, perhaps to actually considering the efficiency in the business. We're talking around things like budgeting, the sort of key performance indicators that you may have there, the forecasting that may take place. Grace, I wonder if you can sort of talk a little bit around the efficiency and effectiveness of running a finance function, what initiatives you've sort of undertaken in your business.
Yes, sure. So the team is absolutely key to the efficiencies of the finance function, and not just their capabilities, but also the team dynamic is very important. It's very important they all gel together, they complement each other, and the personalities fit. It's also very important to review resources in the team and make sure that they are fit for purpose. The business is constantly changing, and the team needs to react to that too. Sometimes the functions that you carry out in that department may not be suitable in the way it was done before, because the business has changed. So it's really important to constantly review, in line with the business plan, what the team is doing and how it's working with the business. And as per my previous sort of answers, really, our cash flow model and risk mitigations around that have been key. That it definitely helps with the efficiency and effectiveness of a team, because a flow of cash obviously massively helps everything you do. Paying your supply chain on time, the morale of your team, it all has a massive impact. And in addition, we've also been looking at enhancing efficiencies by, it's a bit of a software question again, but we've been looking at maybe doing something along like the OCR route, which is basically with purchase ledger having, it's called optical character recognition, basically a piece of software that will recognize the invoice and process part of it or all of it for you, to save time in that area. And that will obviously free up better time spent on more strategic things within the department. So yes, there's been a few changes, and I think it's really important to constantly review and address anything that might not be fit for purpose within that team.
And just reflecting on that, is that an element of AI that you're starting to bring into the business there in the finance function?
Yes, it is. Yes. So I mean, it's not a done deal yet, and it's something we're looking at, but I believe it is something that can improve efficiency. Yeah,
so you're looking around that space, and maybe the same sort of question to you, Kelly, around this efficiencies in the business and the effectiveness of the function. What initiatives are you seeing coming into the finance function?
So we actually have introduced that into our purchase invoicing. We have a system that automatically reads our invoices, and sort of when I joined, it was the first thing I implemented. We just moved to Xero, so we moved to a cloud-based accounting system off of an old, not cloud-based, very slow accounting system. And as part of that, we introduced a lot of AI automation into it. So the purchase invoicing, we have something that you just email across invoices, it automatically scans them and flows through to our approval max system, which is then an automatic system for approval, which goes to every stakeholder in the company it needs to for approval before then filtering in for payment. That's made a huge difference in terms of our manual shift on invoicing. We've done something very similar with our sales invoicing. We have peak periods of invoicing due to the nature of our business. We invoice every single club on the same day once a month at least, which is, if we were manually raising those, still a huge shift and something which was labour intensive in the team. We've been able to automate that as well, so they're now rolling. So we've really leveraged some sort of simple programs, but they've made a big difference to our sort of base finance function, which has allowed our team to be more focused on sort of the strategic and commercial finance roles we need.
And Grace or Kelly, a question that just came in here. Which OCR tool is being used that joins with Xero and Approval Max? Is that
Dext.
Sorry?
Dext. D-E-X-T. Dext.
Okay, interesting. Looking at that, obviously all that sort of efficiency that you're bringing into the business has a sort of end product of producing the management and the financial reports. It sounds like your timelines on sort of doing that can be reduced by the use of this technology.
Yeah, definitely. The our sort of month-end process alongside the invoicing has been significantly decreased in time, sort of increase in efficiency. We definitely save time in those areas compared to what we historically used to.
And where does that time tend to now go? You've saved time in one aspect. Where are you sort of seeing the shift in the balance, how you're spending your time?
It's into that more operational finance piece we have. So we spend a lot more time now reviewing our club's financial performance and working with them and our operational performance and analysing that in order to grow the company. As a finance function, I think we've been able to get involved and support far more projects across the company now as well. I think historically it used to sort of sit within itself a bit more, and now we're able to enter those conversations about big projects across the company and sort of coming back to risk and cash flow, be able to sit there and say, whoa, like, stop. Whereas historically, if you're spending all your time posting invoices, you've not got the opportunity to have those conversations.
Yeah, so actually this brings us quite neatly onto the last sort of theme that we're going to be talking around, which is this value orientation. So you're talking about sort of getting more strategic with the data and making decisions, etc. Grace, I wonder if you can sort of just comment on how you're seeing that kind of value added piece, how the finance function is now getting more involved in delivering value to the business. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, really carrying on with the same theme, the accounting system that's collaborative and obviously giving us information that is feeding into financial reporting and cash flow scenarios, etc., is obviously going to be key for the business, for them to be able to work out, whether a certain strategic decision was the right decision or not. Whether that's, we have divisions as well. So a bit like Kelly's business, you have different areas of the business that some are doing better than others. So you can add value there by giving them the information they need to be able to see how well they are doing as a division, as well as the total group of companies. The other way that you can demonstrate that you've delivered value is positive feedback. We have feedback internally and externally from external partners. Are you paying your supply chain on time and to the correct value is quite a good measure of that feedback. And making sure that we are, along with that cash management piece, we are meeting our compliance regulations, obviously, and that is basically a measure of whether or not we are doing the right in delivering value to the business.
Are you taking feedback from different stakeholders then to sort of understand their sort of view on how that finance function is working, whether it be board members or customers or different departments in the business? You're getting that input to understand how you're sort of delivering the value?
Yes, we are, and it's quite in its infancy. It's not something that we've always done, but we are starting to get feedback from whether that's a different department within the business, or a division that's profit, it's profit loss scenarios that might be coming through, or externally. We are starting to get feedback, and I think that is quite important. And so it's the 360, isn't it?
Obviously, very powerful to have that information which you can then reflect on and perhaps sort of adjust how the finance function is working. And Kelly, you mentioned earlier about this sort of analytical element, the sort of strategic side of that data. You're obviously seeing your finance team become more analytical in its thinking? That's really what's driving your business?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also a bit of a mentality shift. I think you need the people in the team with that kind of analytical and strategic mindset. I think that's key across the business. I think if you don't have that mindset in a company, the company's not going to move forward. They're going to sort of stay where they are. So I think the first thing is the person is key to getting that analytical and strategic sort of objectives through. But it's the real focus on sort of the analytical piece, taking the emotion out of every decision, trying to make some decisions based on data and fact is how we are trying to become more analytical in our thinking rather than reactive and sort of emotional.
And do you think you can drive that mindset shift from the finance function? That's something that you're sort of educating across the business, that data is something that can drive the strategic decisions for it?
Yeah, definitely. It's also something we are trying to push to our network. So to our franchisees, trying to get them to see the importance of sharing and reviewing financial data, and how it can really help their business if they stop and start looking at it a bit more, rather than sort of, I don't know, the day-to-day problems with the door, they can't open the door, and spending all their time on things like that, trying to take a step back and think, what can we do to really change this business? What can we do to drive this business? That mindset piece is something we're really trying to drill in through the use of data. So take a step back, have a look at it, and take a different approach to just reacting. And
yeah, and that's a powerful message, isn't it? The ability to reflect, absorb, and then sort of react to what you're seeing. And Charlotte, I guess from your perspective, again, looking from the outside into a business, what do you sort of view as sort of the key outputs of a well-governed finance function in terms of that use of information to drive it forward?
I think the information being reliable is one of the key things that a well-governed finance function is able to do. And I guess I see it in different ways, and I see it done well and I see it done not so well. And I think where we come in at year end to do an audit and we're making a lot of audit adjustments, or the management accounts are vastly different from the year end accounts because there's certain things that aren't done on a monthly or a quarterly basis that really could be done, but they're actually quite labor intensive. And then when you see a business doing it well, where they've taken out the labor intensive way of doing it, found a way to automate it or to streamline it so that then your management accounts and your reporting information is just there at your fingertips and it's reliable, and you're not waiting for a year-end stock count or a WIP review to be done, that means that you might make a decision halfway through the year that actually wasn't the right decision because you didn't know the right picture of the business at that point in time. So ultimately, I think that a well-governed finance function for me is one that the rest of the business can rely on, and it's just second nature that it's right, and that the numbers are reliable, because the decisions you make are only as good as the numbers that you're basing a decision on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You've got to have that reliable information to be able to make the decisions in the first place. Yeah, absolutely. I think a good time now, just maybe to pull this together. We've got 5 or so minutes left on the webinar. Probably if we just launch a poll, and then I'll come back to each of you in turn and just get your key takeaways from the discussion. What you kind of feel are the key messages that are coming out of it. So there you go. Which areas of your finance function do you feel needs the most attention? Be interesting to get people's thoughts sort of based on the conversation that we've been having. Okay, well, whilst that's coming up, perhaps I can come to you each in turn. We've covered a lot, in a short period of time. Oh, there you go. Creating efficiencies is sort of clearly sort of what has resonated most, and we've talked a lot around that in terms of the use of technology. and sort of the way in which the sort of talent is now used in the business. So clearly that's something which a lot of people are seeing. Cash flow, again, something which we've spoken a lot about, that need to make sure that the systems are set up to deliver insightful cash flow information on a timely basis. But coming to you each in turn then, great conversation. Thank you so much for your inputs. Perhaps just your key takeaways from the discussion. Be useful to get your thoughts there. So Grace, what sort of resonated with you across the course of the conversation?
Yes, so I'm absolutely believe that the correct team structure is key to your efficiencies. And interestingly, I think that was probably first on the list. And making sure that they are fit, that team is fit for the business and it's right for the business. My second key takeaway is cash. So cash is definitely king, and concentrating your efforts in that area of managing cash is a key piece to do within the finance function. And picking up on something that Charlotte said earlier, which I hadn't remembered to note earlier, but if cash is good, things like, with interest rates higher, if you've got cash, then things, even if you can't, afford to tie up that cash on longer terms, we do like an overnight treasury, which has been very lucrative for us. And it's, the rates are so good at the moment that's been, a benefit to the business to bolster the cash.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, with those rates, you do want to make the most of it. Thank you for those thoughts. Kelly, observations from the conversation?
I think Charlotte kind of hit the nail on the head at the end there as well, sort of mentioning how the outputs you create, if they're inaccurate, then there's no point in the finance function. We need to make sure that we're sort of creating accurate data to be able to inform these decisions. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that maybe where the focus is sort of on strategy and commerciality and things, making sure that we keep that rooted sort of finance expertise, making sure that we focus on creating those outcomes, because if you're managing cash, if you think you're managing cash well, but actually you're managing it on something that's incorrect, fundamentally it's flawed. So I guess that's really key to kind of remember that importance of good data, which comes from good people. Grace is absolutely right. I think the fundamentals are the team. I'm shocked on the Q&A to see that sort of talent and holding talent was scored lowest. I think it's probably something that I would say is key to building any team, not even necessarily a finance function, but people and cash are very, very important.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, everything we've been speaking about obviously links together, doesn't it? The efficiencies, the way in which, the people are being used within the team, the output, the interpretation of it. Charlotte, from your point of view, key takeaways around this?
I mean, I think I'm probably going to echo what's already been said about cash and using your team to its fullest ability. And I think it's just being able to take that step back and think, what does my finance team and my software need to look like to best run the business and to best provide the best data? And actually taking that step back and, like Kelly's done, and think about whether you need to bring somebody with an analytical background into the team, or whether you need to upskill the team that you've already got, or thinking about putting your cash on overnight deposit. I think it's that it's actually thinking through the various different points, and just having that, which I guess time is of the essence, but having that moment to step back and think about what your priority is.
Yeah, absolutely. Reflection and thinking about how all the different sort of threads pull together to make that effective function. So we're just running up against time. Thank you so much for your insights, Kelly, Grace, Charlotte. Really appreciate your thoughts here on what it takes to run a well-governed finance function. Clearly, a lot going into the mix there. Thank you very much to our audience for joining us as well. This is the first of a series that we're running on finance directors, and the next one in the new year is going to be based around financial reporting and planning and decision making. So hopefully you'll be able to join us then. But joining, everyone, and goodbye from all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.